All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive right into something absolutely wild, a completely fascinating chronicle of human evolution. We're looking at 250,000 years of history, specifically the era known as the Great Dispersion. And as you'll see, extreme isolation didn't actually destroy humanity. Instead, it fractured us into something brilliantly diverse. To really get into this, we have to start by asking ourselves a massive question. What actually happens to humanity in 250,000 years? In this particular journey, humans don't venture out into the cosmos to discover alien life. No, instead, after 250,000 years of isolation, they rediscover themselves. Okay, let's jump into Section 1, A Fractured Humanity. So the Great Dispersion wasn't just some sudden end to the world. Back in the 22nd century, a rapidly destabilizing biosphere and the total collapse of the surface economy basically forced humans into these extreme migrations. We're talking underground, deep into the oceans, up into orbit, and out into the harshest irradiated deserts. And then, 80,000 generations of complete isolation. Just let that staggering scale of time sink in for a second. 80,000 generations. It wasn't until the deep future, 250 millennia later, that these divergent branches finally reunited at an orbital station called the Girdle of Gaia during the historic summit of the Five Hands. Moving right along to Section 2, the Four Descendants. You literally have to see this to believe how far the human form was pushed. First up, the Lithocenes. Retreating into deep subterranean caverns, they became functionally blind, relying instead on highly sensitive vibrissae pads and advanced echolocation. Imagine living your entire life in the pitch black of a cave. Next, we have the Pelagians. Adapting to shallow seas, they didn't just grow gills, right? They evolved a massive spleen that acts as a red blood cell reservoir. They can stay submerged for 70 minutes on a single breath. Then, you've got the Aurelians up in microgravity, standing up to 2.6 meters tall with prehensile feet and a brain completely optimized for navigating 3D space with absolutely zero sense of up or down. Finally, the Zero Radials. These guys survive the blasted surface by developing metallic melanin shields right in their skin to block radiation. But, and this is the absolute crucial takeaway here, despite these radical physical changes, every single branch maintained the exact same capacity for high-level, abstract reasoning. All right, Section 3, the orbital transport debate. This brings us to the core of the summit itself. As recorded by a baseline human archivist named Dr. Kenneth Vance, the 4 delegates faced an incredibly high-stakes objective. They had to figure out how to safely transport a massive cometary payload to sustain the biosphere systems for all of their distinct civilizations. It was, quite literally, a make-or-break engineering challenge. Now, notice how the Aurelian delegate, Lyri 7, tackles the problem. Because her species evolved in microgravity, she naturally visualizes space dynamically. She argues against static stations altogether, treating space more like a fluid, three-dimensional river. She wants to allow the cargo to just drift along gravitational gradients, catching it naturally. Her mind processes these incredibly complex vector changes without breaking a sweat. But then, on the flip side, we have the Lithocene delegate, Bossk Rohr. His mind has been shaped by millennia living deep in solid rock, where a single collapse means instant death. So naturally, he demands physical anchors and massive load-bearing structures. To him, an untethered, drifting orbit isn't some elegant solution. It's a terrifying invitation to a catastrophic structural failure. He wants a rock-solid, rigid space elevator. Enter the aquatic Pelagian, Koa, who chimes in to counter with the principles of fluid dynamics. Living your life in ocean currents teaches you one very important lesson: what doesn't bend will break. He points out that a perfectly rigid structure facing the gravitational shear of the moon is going to suffer severe structural fatigue. His solution? Resilient adaptability. He pitches a flexible, segmented chain of vessels. And finally, Dara, the desert-dwelling Zero Radial, just cuts right through all these sensory biases with strict thermodynamics. Surviving extreme resource scarcity her whole life means she views the problem entirely through the lens of energy efficiency. She proposes the ultimate compromise, a hybrid system that perfectly balances the material costs against the actual energy saved during transport. And this is where it all comes together. Thanks to a cognitive translation matrix that converted their different paradigms into one universal logic, they designed an absolute masterpiece of engineering. The Lithocenes provided incredibly dense carbon nanotube anchors. The Pelagians designed flexible joints to handle the orbital wind. The Aurelians plotted complex 3D trajectories to ensure absolutely zero fuel waste. And the Zero Radials? they optimized the thermal efficiency of the entire operation. They combined their unique realities into a brilliant, unified plan that no single species could have ever conceived on their own. So, Section 4, the science of divergence. To really understand how this happened, we have to look at a very real evolutionary driver, allopatric speciation. Because these populations were completely cut off from one another, genetic bottlenecks occurred. The extreme environments heavily selected for specific survival traits, things like CO2 tolerance underground or radiation shielding on the surface. Over thousands of generations, these distinct physical traits just became permanently locked in. And yet, while their human bodies adapted to pitch-black caves or zero gravity, their minds actually stayed parallel. Why? Well, it's called cognitive conservation. The core hominid processor for abstract reasoning, empathy, and tool use was highly conserved because it was universally selected for. Honestly, whether you are navigating a coral reef or a blasted desert, intelligence is simply the ultimate survival tool. The bodily hardware changed drastically for sure, but the cognitive software, it remained exactly the same. And Dr. Vance realized something deeply profound here. Historically, humanity had always feared divergence, assuming it would just lead to war, right? But actually, scratch that. Divergence is what allowed humanity to escape the monoculture trap. That's the intense danger of being a single species with a single perspective, deeply vulnerable to a single point of failure. Instead, they achieved a speculative synthesis. By possessing multiple cognitive perspectives, this diverse family of species became infinitely more resilient. Which brings us to our final section, the Starship synthesis. Fast forward 50 years, and the crew of humanity's first interstellar vessel, the Synthesis, was made up of all 4 species. As they accelerated toward Alpha Centauri, a massive crisis struck. A burst of hard radiation, a total power failure, and a tear in the outer hull. Now, a single species crew, they would have perished almost instantly. But just look at how this diverse crew responded. The Lithocenes, completely unfazed by the sudden pitch black, navigated the ruined corridors by sound alone. The Zero Radials, protected by their shielded skin, walked right into the deadly reactor core to manually stabilize it. Outside, the Aurelians used their prehensile limbs in zero-G to rapidly weld the hull tear with superhuman agility. Meanwhile, the Pelagians actually swam into the flooded cooling reservoirs to manage the engine's thermal dissipation. Working completely in sync, they literally saved the ship in under 3 hours. We'll leave you today with this final, profound thought from Dr. Vance's records. When we look at these 4 distinctly different beings, we're really forced to ask what truly makes us human. It's clearly not our physical form. Humanity is a cognitive flame. It's the diverse, questioning fire of our collective minds, seeking order and ultimately choosing cooperation over isolation. By fracturing, we didn't break. We became so much stronger together. It really leaves us wondering, in our own pursuit of a single, uniform future today, are we perhaps blinding ourselves to the boundless power of our own diversity?
Please like and subscribe.